Welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife, and I have a really amazing guest that is on the show today. Her name is Lindsay Williams. She is a language learning expert. Basically, she helps people learn languages, and I can't wait for you guys to hear from her. So, as always, I'm your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, let me start off by introducing you to Lindsay, my guest today, who runs Lindsay Does Languages and is on a mission to teach you how to learn a language. Yes, you. She does this via her unique program, Language Life, and other courses, which are all about making language learning fun whilst being productive. She recently completed her MA in Applied Linguistics and has spent the past 2 decades plus of her life learning languages, which means she knows a thing or two about doing this herself. This has led her to features in The Guardian and Fluent in 3 months, as well as collaborating with Open University and the BBC. Lindsay has studied French and Spanish to a degree level, and depending on which day of the week it is and how awake she is, she can have a decent enough conversation in German, Italian, and Portuguese, as well as many other languages, and one of which I have a hard time pronouncing. She actually got her master's focus on and did a final master's dissertation in. So I'm really excited to share the conversation I had with her. We covered a lot of information, and I just loved all of the stuff she had to share so much that we're going to do it in 2 parts. So here we go. All right. All right. So, Lindsay, tell us who you are and what you do.
I am Lindsay. I run Lindsay Does Languages, and I teach people how to learn languages. It would be really easy. I'd love if I could just say I teach languages, but that's not quite it. I used to teach languages. I used to teach English and French and Spanish. And I soon realized that my real passion and drive wasn't just those 3 languages, it was all the languages. And second, I was like, I'd go to a lesson and be with a student for an hour a week, and I'd say, how was this past week? What did you do? And sometimes it would be, or most of the time, it would be, oh, well, I've been busy and I've had other things going on. I haven't had much time to practice or to study this week. And I realized that it doesn't matter how many lessons people would book with me. If they didn't know what to do in between, if they didn't know how to best keep learning and still fit all of it, everything else in, then there was no point in them paying me and me going to their house every week, right, for that 1 hour. So that's when I started to kind of shift the work that I do, and that's why I do what I do.
So, how is what you do different than what you did before? So, what you're doing now different? What is the main change you've made?
I work with people learning any language, and any number of languages as well. So I'm not teaching you in a kind of very traditional sense, like you might remember from school language lessons. I'm not saying, right, and this is a list of vocab, and this is how the grammar works, and now we're going to practice, and now you're going to speak some stuff, say the thing. Okay, well done. It's not that at all. Instead, I when I work with my clients, I give people the knowledge and the skills to be able to learn any language for themselves. So I really think of it as, the fish proverb of like, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he eats for life. I really think of it as that, like what we learn together is just like equips you for a lifetime of learning any language you want. And that's why I reached out to you, because it's like, Sam, how in sort of military life, if you get deployed somewhere all of a sudden, then, okay, now you've got to go there. Now we're moving here for a bit. You don't know when, where, like it could happen anytime that suddenly you need to learn a language. And the skills that I really focus on working with and teaching and sharing empower people to do that any language, anytime, any level as well. Like that's the other thing. It's not always about, oh, well, if I'm going to start learning Spanish, let's say, I have to keep learning Spanish until I am completely fluent and able to do everything I can in English in Spanish. And I can't start another language until my Spanish is that level, you know? And so it really stops us, it really blocks us from moving forward. And so yeah, just to kind of encourage that something is always going to be better than nothing. Most, I know a lot of languages. I've studied a lot of languages, but not to like the same level as my English. But that's because I don't need to. Most of the time, less is more in some respects. It just gives you that foot in the door to start a conversation and to get things rolling a little bit.
Yeah, it blows people's mind when I say that I've studied as many languages as I have. And they're like, oh, so you're fluent in? I'm like, no, my main goal was so that I could at least introduce myself, explain I'm an English speaker learning that language, and do they speak English? Like, those were my basic goals so that pretty much anyone I run into, I can explain my situation in their language. And so, yeah, I think that having that mindset that you have to be fluent before you can move on is a huge barrier.
Mm, mm. It is, it is. And I know lots of people who are the opposite of that and have felt really guilty about it. Like you and me, Sam, they love learning languages. They love, I call it dabbling. Um, like spending a bit of time with one language and then getting curious about another and going and learning some of that. And, I know a lot of people like this. I work with a lot of people like this. And then what happens is
Just a second. We're losing Lindsay on this interview. She is in England, so
allowed to
we're
do
having
this.
some. Okay, there you are. We lost you for a second. Um, so I
Yeah.
explained to everyone that we're recording this. You're in another continent, so there's going to be some
Yeah.
hiccups in this interview, and I don't want to keep stopping and starting you. So, you were talking about dabblers, and then it kind of cut out. So, in case people missed that audio, go refresh. Sorry.
Catches up. So yeah, with dabblers, where because our kind of social cultural expectation is that learning a language means fluency, going to the end, learning it beautifully, perfectly, as good as your native language. That means that people end up feeling really guilty when they don't do that. And that just doesn't have to be the case. Like it's completely valid to want to learn multiple languages to a decent level, to whatever level you want, in fact, without necessarily that meaning, well, I've started this language, so I have to finish, I have to complete and get to fluency, because language learning, there is no finish, there is no end. It's just continuous. And that can be also a really difficult thing to get to grips with, because we're so used to like starting something new and then it finishing, like maybe we start a specific course for 6 weeks or something and it finishes. Or we go to, even like when you go to university, it's X number of years and then you finish. There's a completion. With language learning, there is no completion. And so it's really something as well that I encourage people to just embed into life, into daily life, because if we can think of this as normal as brushing your teeth or exercising, cooking, those things that happen every day, if we can begin to think of language learning in that way, rather than this, extravagant hobby that's going to give us a skill for our career, then actually that's a much better way for us to keep going in the long run.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that sometimes we do get into a check mark mentality in our lives and we just want to make a list and check things off. But it's important to be lifelong learners, to realize that education doesn't end when we graduate high school or college or whatever, that education and educating ourselves is something we should continue to pursue throughout our lives with whatever we're passionate about. And if you're passionate about languages, it's fine to be picking up and dabbling and pursuing this and knowing that you're never going to be, you know, perfect in all ways. I am technically fluent in Spanish. Is my Spanish perfect? No, there are so many different versions of Spanish because of the different countries and their different dialects that being perfect in Spanish is going to be something that I probably won't achieve in this lifetime, but that's fine. I love learning.
Yeah, I think as well, I think of it as different levels of fluency too. I find that really helpful. Like you can be fluent in certain situations and not fluent, native like fluent, you know. You can be fluent in holiday Spanish and have everything that you need in Spanish to get by in a holiday situation, right? All those scenarios that you're going to encounter on a holiday, you can do. That's holiday fluent. You know, you could be fluent in your workspace. If you use languages for work, you could know that kind of email etiquette and stuff that, you know, I wouldn't know in Spanish because I've never needed, but you could be work Spanish fluent, you know, so there's these different areas of our life where languages come into play. And I find that that's really helpful because it just helps to take that pressure off of trying to get to this very, very far off end goal of mystical native like fluency.
Yeah. Do you think it's helpful for people to learn languages with others?
Definitely, definitely. There are a few reasons. First of all, I want to say that everyone can learn a language and it's something that we can do independently. And what I mean by that is you don't have to wait to join a class. You don't have to wait until there is a teacher in your town that teaches the language that you want. You can start now and you can do that independently. But there's definitely something to be said for involving others because at the end of the day, languages are people, right? Like people made language. So to learn them completely in isolation from other people is fine if that's what you want. But for most of us, we're probably going to want some interaction. And to learn with others in you know with other learners, there's some real benefits there too. If you're learning at the same time, you kind of bounce off each other as like study buddies. When I learned Korean, it was like 2016, and my friend in California and me in the UK, we wanted to learn a language together, right? Like, and we'd both learned a few. And we're like, well, what haven't we learned between us? What's the kind of common language we both haven't done and would like to? And it was Korean. And so we started learning Korean. We met once a week on Skype and shared our new sort of vocab and what we'd learned that week. And so not only was this great motivation because I knew I wasn't doing it alone, it was also a really good accountability because I knew that in that week I had to have something to share by the time that our call came around. I didn't want to just show up and be like, oh, I did nothing because I knew that she was going to have something for me. So it was really good accountability, which is another huge benefit of involving others in your learning too. And it was, yeah, just motivation and accountability that comes with that. And I heard recently actually that if you know, with language learning, there's a lot to be said for goals, right? And setting goals. But that alone isn't enough. I actually heard this week, and I don't know the source of this, but if you set a goal, there's a 10% chance you're going to achieve it. If you just set a goal in your head, okay. If you set a goal and you write it down and you make a plan, it goes up to like 50%. If you set a goal, write it down, make a plan, and tell someone, 65. You still think, okay, it still seems quite low. But if you set a goal, write it down, make a plan, tell someone, and arrange regular kind of check-in for that accountability with someone, it goes up to like 95% that you're going to get done what you want to get done. And so, yeah, there's definitely real power in involving other people. And there doesn't even have to be other people learning the same language as you, or even learning a language. It could just be someone in your life, in your, you know, who you live with, who you say, oh, I'm going to do this thing. Can you ask me every evening when we're cooking dinner what I've done today for that goal and how it went? And then just kind of being really open about it, because then you're going to think, oh, well, we're gonna talk, we're gonna talk later. They're gonna ask me what I've done. I wanna have something to report back. So yeah, there's definitely something to be said for that.
I love that you bring that up because one of the things I teach is goal setting. And that is true. Actually, everything you just cited, there's research studies that prove that.
Yeah,
And it is an amazing thing to apply to any part of your life. But yeah, it can be especially effective when you're trying to learn something.
definitely.
So when you're getting a new client, when someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to learn a language or do this or that, what is the first thing you do with somebody who approaches you as a client?
So the way that I work with people is in my program Language Life primarily. And the first thing is there's an intake form. So this asks lots of questions about what languages you're learning. If you could describe your language learning right now in one word, what would it be? What are your like sort of controversial opinions on language learning? Lots and lots of questions to help me figure out where you're at right now and how we can best shape our time together to make it the most impactful for you. So we do that, and then we have lots of like there's various elements to that. But that's the first thing, is just understanding, because I think as well, not only is that useful for me to then know more about who I'm working with and know more about where they're coming from, but I think it's a really useful reflection for yourself, to answer those questions, to sit and think about it and think, what is my controversial opinion? What do I go against the grain on? Like, everyone thinks that this is true, but actually, no, I think the opposite. To really sit and think through all of that stuff is a very helpful process because the core of what I teach, it's about putting yourself at the center of your own language learning, and not following, methods and systems that someone else has designed to work for them. And that's great if they work for them, but it's not going to work for everyone because we all learn differently. And so putting you at the center, the first step to getting better at that is actually being able to kind of like detach yourself and sort of not be in it, right? And to sort of almost observe you as a learner. And so that intake form is a really good opportunity to begin to develop and practice that skill. Because when you can do that, when you can really think about thinking and think about what you're doing and what you're learning, that's the start to being able to then make the changes that are going to help you get better at language learning.
Okay, yeah. And you've said that in the conversations we had leading up to this,
Yeah.
that you've worked with a military spouse before. How did that go? Why did she or they reach out to you and so on? Like what did that look like and what were their needs?
Yeah. So
Mm, Without
it was
getting too
interesting.
specific and
Yeah. I'll share what I can. So they were living in Italy, and that appointment for her husband was coming to an end. They were going to be moving to Germany. And they'd been in Italy for a couple of years, but it had been tricky in the beginning for her to really fall in with learning Italian. Like, it was easy to sort of, stay on the base and not need to interact in Italian too much. And, then eventually she decided, okay, what an opportunity. I'm here in Italy. I'm going to learn Italian. Let's go. Let's do this. My kids are picking it up quicker than I am. I need to do something about that. And learn some Italian to a really decent level. But then moving to Germany, didn't want that same experience that she'd had with Italy in the beginning, and also didn't want to lose the Italian that she'd now gained as a result of then needing to learn German. So there was these twofold reasons for wanting to work together. And it really, really helped. Like, now she's out there and she's kind of spreading the word and helping others to learn language and talking about it. She has a podcast and all of this stuff. So it's really, really cool to see the impact that that working together has had on her languages, and she's so much more like just confident and chill with it. I think she would very much self-describe as a recovering perfectionist. Like those words came out of her mouth a lot when we were working together. And yeah, like to see that change and to see that acceptance in, okay, well, not much happened today, but that's okay because I still read my kids a story in Italian at night. There was still some Italian in my day. Amazing, right? To see those acknowledgements throughout the way was just wonderful. So yeah, it's been really, really interesting. And everyone I work with has such a different story. And we all have a history with language as well. Not sometimes positive, not always. And so there's always something there to unpack a little bit and to investigate. Okay, well, why do we feel how we feel about language learning? Because chances are it's come from something that has happened, and we can work to uncover all of that stuff as well.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of military families that homeschool also. What are some pointers you could give to homeschoolers who are trying to get their kids excited about learning? Because maybe they tried to learn the language in school and just didn't feel successful. And now they're trying to help their kids and they just don't know where to start.
Yeah, it's really cool because I think the most exciting thing about homeschooling your kids, especially with language, is that you have that flexibility to discover what lights them up. Like the thing about language learning is that it's not like any other subject in that you could learn any subject through languages, right? You can't really do that with other stuff in quite the same way. And I don't just mean, okay, well, you do your geography lesson taught in French, or you do your history lesson taught in Spanish. I don't quite mean that. I mean that you can incorporate history into your Spanish lesson. You can incorporate geography into your French lessons, learn about places that speak French, learn about the history of Spain and the Spanish-speaking world. So there's loads of ways that you can bring other subjects into languages and bring languages into other subjects, vice versa. But also the other big advantage is that, right, okay, successful language learning, there's three real factors to what makes language learning successful. It needs to be fun, it needs to be flexible, and it needs to be functional. So it needs to be fun, right? That's first, because actually if it's boring, if your kids hate their homeschool language lessons, then, it's kind of a pattern for life then that they're going to be getting set into. So it needs to be fun, right? It needs to be flexible in that it's not something rigid. You don't have to feel obliged to follow. If you found a textbook online or something that you've bought, you don't have to feel obliged to follow that through completely in order. Do what makes sense. And it needs to be functional. So it's all well and good being fun and flexible, but if it doesn't actually work, if it doesn't get your kids learning the language, then what's the point, right? So all three of those factors need to play a part. And to go back to that first one of fun, part of what really, really can spark that is actually a bit of language discovery. So does it have to be French? Does it have to be Spanish? What about if you once a month, for example, instead of French or Spanish lessons, you all discover a little bit about Mandarin Chinese together, or you have a session once a month where, oh, okay, let's pick a country on a map and close your eyes. Oh, okay, we're here. What language do they speak? I don't say, struggling to think of a country that doesn't speak French or Spanish now.
Czechoslovakia.
There we go. Czechoslovakia, right? What language do they speak in Czechia, right? Oh, they speak Czech. Okay, let's sit and discover a little bit about this language and some basic words to say hello, thank you. And then when you're having dinner that night, how do you say thank you in Czech? Can you remember? So you can bring it all into other areas of life too. And I think bringing in that element of language discovery every now and then when you can just really helps to show your children that it's not a case of not everyone speaks English first and foremost, but also it's not a case of just, well, everyone speaks English or Spanish or French or, the kind of common ones we tend to teach. But actually, there is a lot. It's like 7,000 languages in the world. Like,
Yeah.
so many. And so to just increase their awareness of language diversity for me at a young age is one of the best things that you can do to kind of showcase that and increase that level of understanding and tolerance as well. And they might go on after that Czech discovery session and actually want to explore more about Czech and then kind of do it on their own time. And there's tools like with things like Duolingo, there's so much where they can go and explore further on their own as well.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I'm gonna start feeding in some of the questions from
Okay.
listeners. One listener asked, "What helps motivate someone want to learn a new language like a high school student?" And I think you kind of already covered this, the making it fun. But do you have anything else you could add, maybe geared towards high school students?
Yeah, definitely. So I started French when I was in primary school. When I then went to high school, it was boring. The first 2 years, they were like starting from zero. So all the stuff I'd done in primary school was then repeated for me in high school. And I was bored, right? And it wasn't until I heard Shakira's first English album, Laundry Service, that's how old I am, with some Spanish songs on. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I want to translate these words. If I can learn French, then I surely can learn Spanish. It's the same process. And so wanting to do Spanish then meant that for my exams, my school said, oh, well, to do this new language, you have to do French. You have to prove that you can learn a language. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. I can do good enough in French. I'll do both of them. And so for me, even at high school, the motivation was some kind of connection or a passion. I always talk about this as finding your Shakira because that's what it was for me. And it doesn't have to be music. It could be something cultural like that. It could be film or TV shows. And so easy nowadays, right, with Netflix and things to find something in other languages. But also it could just be something like cuisine. Like if you really love a particular type of food from a place, you can explore that, and that becomes your kind of passion point, your connection then between that and the language. So yeah, with high schoolers in particular, again, maybe even that concept, but in a more kind of grown up way of the language discovery, just to let them explore a little bit outside of the English language world, I think is a really
Yeah.
key way to get them inspired and motivated for that.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I think recipes are fantastic. I
Mm.
love being able to like pull Spanish recipes and actually do them because I can read them. Trying food from different countries is great, and you can make it a language learning opportunity. So I think that's a brilliant idea. Um, do you have suggestions for immersive language experiences, ways to help get people, into the language?
Yeah, absolutely. So immersion, we often think of as meaning we have to go to the place, we have to buy the plane ticket and just go to Paris. And in the week, we will magically speak French and be fluent. But in reality, if we don't feel confident enough before we go, we're going to spend most of our time in our hotel. We're going to find directions on our Google Maps. We're going to find restaurant recommendations on TripAdvisor. We're not really going to speak to people unless we actively want to seek it out. So the thing is as well, we don't have to do that anymore. We can create an immersive environment wherever we are in the world. So again, with the film and the TV and the music, even podcasts, there's so many ways that you can surround yourself with a language. Even things like posters on your wall, right? If you like for a weekend, you're like, I really just want to be in French mode this weekend. You could print out some French posters or whatever, like get them all up there. So there's loads of ways that you can create that sense of immersion at home. Book in on a lesson as well, I would recommend, because immersion doesn't just have to mean surrounding yourself and hoping it magically sinks in, because that's not quite what's going to happen, unfortunately. But I would recommend, if that's what you're looking for, is to book in. There's loads of websites like italki, where you can find online language tutors. and get that in during this sort of immersive experience. And also finding like online experiences and online classes that you can attend in general in the language. So this was especially in COVID, there was a lot of this, and there's some of it has kind of stayed of like, I think I'm still subscribed to one on my email for like tours of Italy in Italian. So if someone is walking around Italy like with their phone or with their camera and giving you like a live feed of where they are, like in Pisa or Venice or wherever. So yeah, stuff like that is really, really cool. So it's worth looking around for those sorts of experiences, Airbnb experiences, Eventbrite, you know, those sorts of places.
I did not even realize virtual tours. That is a really brilliant idea. Because they would do virtual field trips for kids in COVID, but I hadn't even thought of taking it to another country. That is fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty
Um,
cool.
Thank you all so much for putting up with the technical glitches that we had in this episode. Recording when you are in separate parts of the world, different continents, and everything can be a little tricky. And Lindsay Williams did a fantastic job. I'm super excited for you guys to hear her responses next week about what resources she would recommend in learning languages, what are different products and programs that she uses and likes, as well as she will finish answering your guys' questions, because as she started in this episode to do, I had a lot of questions from listeners, and then she's going to continue. Basically, that's the entire bit of next week. We'll be answering your guys' questions. I hope you all are doing well, and as always, you are listening to Life of a Military Wife.